Shogun, Episode 8, Abyss of Life. This was a good one, so let's jump in and talk about it. So we open up with Toranaga seemingly sick as they're riding towards Edo here after the death of his son, Nagakado. We see Yabashige speaking on Nagakado's death as well, and he's telling this guy to write it down. He's got this weird obsession with death, so he kind of ranks these type of deaths or whatever, which may or may not be some foreshadowing we'll see in upcoming episodes. But we do also see Saeki's army they wait behind them, and this is going to buy them some time. They have apparently 49 days as a custom in Japan to mourn due to his son's death, so they wait outside of the city, basically making sure they don't escape. But they are allowing them the customary 49 days to mourn, which turns out to be a big advantage to Toranaga. We see Blackthorn ride up and try to comfort Toranaga in some way and offers his apologies for his loss. And Toranaga's kind of giving him the cold shoulder, and this is part of the game here he's going to play, as we'll get to in just a few minutes. But he seems to be kind of shunning him now the last couple episodes, whereas before they seemed to be a lot of respect between the two. And he offered him all these things, especially being Hatamoto and all this good stuff. But this is going to play into Toranaga's plan as he knows how he is, and he's using his character, as well as Yabashige's, as we'll talk about, to get what he wants here. Then, of course, we have the great intro, and then we come out of the intro, and we see Ishido back in Osaka, and he basically is talking to Ochiba there, and he actually says that he wants to marry her to strengthen their alliance. Of course, he wants this to consolidate his own power, married to the most powerful woman in Japan and mother to the heir, and she'll likely do what she has to do to strengthen her position, protect her son, and essentially remain in power herself. So these two seem to be made for each other. And then we're back in Edo again. We do spend most of this episode in Edo, but we swing back to Osaka a few times. And we see all of Toranaga's vassals sitting around speaking of Nagakado, trying to kind of honor his life. And Omi seems to be really bothered by this, as they were friends. But they talk of Nagakado and his short life, and they do actually mention that he was pretty damn reckless. Specifically, Hiramatsu, he talks about how reckless he was. But again, this is all kind of part of this game, I believe, and we'll talk about, whether that was planned in the last episode or not. It's what I mentioned in the last video. Nagakado actually goes to assassinate Saeki. Was that part of the plan, and how that would have worked out differently if he would have actually killed him instead of slipping on a rock and dying himself? We also see Omi in this scene here as he's talking about Toranaga surrendering, and they all kind of feel the same way, so he's kind of saying the quiet part out loud. Nobody really wants to say anything. They all know they're just going to essentially die for nothing. They don't really understand, but as we learn later, Hiramatsu knows different. We see there's a plan for Yabashige to go on his own to Osaka with the cannons and the guns and all that good stuff as well. He is supposed to go alone, and it seems to be this is set up by Toranaga to see if he will align himself with Ishido. But there is a bigger plan here involving Blackthorn, because he does want him to actually attack the castle of Osaka from the sea as he had planned in the first place. And then we of course get Nagakado's funeral, and it is notable that in both of these scenes Toranaga himself is not there in his own son's funeral. Now I did question whether he is actually sick, because he did cough a lot around other people, but I wonder if this is part of his act as kind of this crazy old man to get everybody to believe that. And while I'm sure he was definitely distraught about his son's death, regardless whether it was planned or not in some way, shape, or form, let me know in the comments below what you think. Was he actually sick, or was this part of his kind of old, sick, crazy man routine? Then Butaro seems to feel bad or something for Mariko all of a sudden after all these years, and wants to make tea for her. Then we see Blackthorn down in Edo, and he is not in the castle. He has not been given a place in the castle at a place of honor like he would as a Hatamoto, so essentially it's kind of like he's been demoted. And if we remember in the opening scene, we did see Mariko give him his books back as they headed into Edo. But we do see Toranaga meet with Albedo as well. And now Toranaga is basically saying, Mariko, I want you to translate for me because I don't trust these Catholics. They're not our friends. But he does keep his word and says he can build a church there in Edo. But essentially he's there, and he's basically saying he wants him to align with Ochiba, get in line with her, and then we can take out Ishido. As he tells Toranaga they tried to get the other regents to align with him, but they wouldn't budge. And then we see Hiramatsu in the scene. He's sure to pipe up to Toranaga and tries to talk to him about his surrender. But Toranaga again confirms that he does want to surrender. He just wants a peaceful death. But he's sure to do this in front of Albedo, and says he will build his church for him and keep his word as long as he returns to Osaka and let them know what he's seeing there as far as what's going on, everybody feeling down about everything, and him actually wanting to surrender, and he has no plans to go to war. So this is all part of the plan to make it look like his surrender is going to be real. And then we have this scene with Mariko and Buntaro, and it seems to be a nice scene where she's kind of paying attention to him, showing a little bit of emotion. And then we see this traditional tea ceremony where Buntaro makes Mariko a traditional matcha boba tea, and during this process, he actually asks her if she's still under the spell of Blackthorn. She does not reply, and then he decides, we're going to die anyway, so let's just die together, and actually grants her the ability to go take her own life as she's been wanting for so many years. But she rejects him, and it's pretty damn harsh. She's basically saying, you still don't understand. It's not just death I wish for, and I would rather live 1,000 years than die here with you like this. So it's pretty damn harsh, and he actually starts to cry as she leaves. So Mariko went from pretty respectful and nice during this tea ceremony, seemed to really appreciate it, to ice cold real fucking quick. Then we see Blackthorn back in Edo here down in the city, and he actually goes to meet his men, and he was been wanting this. This is one thing he's been wanting. He's been asking of Toranaga the whole entire time, and he was going to walk away. He decided he didn't want to meet them after all, but the guy seems pretty pissed off that he's wearing Japanese clothing. He seems to be in good shape, and they're all barely making it, and essentially goes off on Blackthorn about leading them there to Japan. They could have turned around and went home, all this good stuff. Ends up attacking him. He beat the shit out of him. He was already half drunk anyway, but then he continues to beat him on the ground in the face. So I don't know if it killed him or not. Either way, I guess it doesn't matter. I guess having his old crew back is just out of the picture now. But this is a really important scene here for Blackthorn and his development as far as a character arc, because he really has an identity crisis at this point. He was kind of rejected in some ways by Mariko. He's not really sure he still fits in this Japanese culture he thought he was kind of growing to love. And now he goes to see his old shipmates, and he realizes he's just not like them anymore. So he's kind of alone at this point, and this is why he ends up turning to Yabushige, who he most identifies with in Japan. Then, of course, he goes and meets with Yabushige and tries to sell for him, because basically he's saying this whole time, look, Toranaga's just going to go die. He's a dead man. I'm not going to die for him. Y'all's customs are damn crazy. If you're going to die, at least die fighting. He actually said this about Toranaga's son. At least he went out trying to fight. And they have this conversation about trying to make his own fate, and he kind of calls back to one of the first couple episodes where he saw Yabushige make his own fate and try to take his own life when the waves were going to pull him out to sea. Of course, he does end up getting saved, as we saw in that previous episode, with the rope coming down at just the right time. But Blackthorn really still respects him for that he was going to make his own fate. He learned a lot from that little lesson there, had respect for him ever since. Still calls him a shithead, but wants to align with him to at least go out fighting in some way. Yabushige actually declines the offer several times and says Toranaga will not surrender. He's got something up his sleeve, they don't know what it is, but he will not betray his lord. And then we see Omi and Kiku as they watch the lady of the tea house plan her new tea house in Edo. And Omi, being with Kiku and being in love with Kiku, questions what he's fighting for now. And Omi's really questioning everything here. Does he surrender, just give up his own life? He just saw his best friend die. Or does he turn on Toranaga and try to fight for something and again make his own fate, which seems to be kind of the theme of this episode, that and the abyss of life. And then in kind of a little comedy relief here, we see Albedo out here as well, as he is checking out his assigned plot to build his church. And he looks over, and he's right beside the courtesans where they're going to build their tea house. And it's kind of a slap in the face to him from Toranaga, because he's going to let him build a church, but he's going to build it right beside a whorehouse. And then we're back in Osaka, and we see Daioin, and she had apparently had a stroke in the middle of the night. We see Ochiba coming in and sitting with her during her last moments. And Daioin actually tells her to stop playing all these games, essentially hinting at you're in the wrong side. You need to reach out to Toranaga, stop all these games, stop all this bullshit. So we'll see how that actually plays out with Ochiba and Ishido and what she's actually going to do, if her plans are going to change. It seems to be hinting at that at least. But Daioin actually does die right there with her. She seems to be really sad for just a moment. You can see kind of the humanity in her, and then she goes right back to ice cold. And then we go back to Edo and the new castle as it's being built, and we see all the vassals meet with Toranaga. And this was a pretty powerful scene here. It's basically Toranaga is just confirming he wants to surrender, he wants to die peacefully. It's more important to save Japan than his own clan. And he asks for signatures of who's going to go and surrender with him. And then a couple of the other lords in the front row actually stop and say, no, we don't want to do this. You're crazy. They basically, respectfully say, we don't understand why you're just giving up. We can't just follow you to a senseless death or whatever. It's against our code, that type of thing. And then, of course, Hidematsu sits up and threatens to commit seppuku unless Toranaga changes his mind. But he says this in front of everybody, and basically Buntaro pleads with him, don't do it. But, of course, Toranaga holds his ground and says, I've made my decision, do what you got to do. Apparently the only person in this world that Toranaga trusts, he asks his son Buntaro to second him, which means remove his head, which is a honorable thing to do when somebody's committing seppuku. And Hidematsu goes through with it, and he actually does it. I thought he was going to stop him at the last minute or something when I first saw this, but Toranaga let him do it, but you could see the pain in his eyes. And this is a very powerful kind of oh shit moment in this episode, in this series for that matter, because he's his right-hand man, his most trusted friend and ally, and he is now gone. But then in the very next scene, we see Mariko visiting with Toranaga, and we finally get this big revelation. It turns out that Hidematsu did all this and killed himself just for a show in front of all these other lords to make it look like his surrender is going to actually be real. During this scene, Toranaga also asked if Blackthorn has visited Yabashige yet, as he knew he would. He knew they would ally with each other during this time and not just willfully die. So he knew it was going to happen because he actually asked, has he visited Yabashige yet? Mariko confirms that he has, but that he denied his request, but he said he won't after today, and that was the point of all this, is to get them to team up with each other and go right into Osaka. And speaking of Osaka, we go back there for just a moment, and we see Ochiba goes to Ishido, and she bows to him. Nothing is said here, but he's got a kind of a smirk on his face, and it seems to be she is going to agree to marry him. Now again, we'll see if she actually sticks by his side, as I don't believe she will. And of course, as Toranaga said, Yabashige aligns with Blackthorn. They're already on the ship for the next day as they are supposed to head out to Osaka. And essentially because of this show, they do believe that Toranaga is just going to go surrender and die without fighting. So I kind of understand what they're doing. But right before they leave, Mariko joins them with a letter from Toranaga, and that surprises the hell out of them because he knew that they were going to go, and she gives them presumably a letter written by Toranaga saying, I am to accompany you to Osaka. So that really surprises Yabashige and Blackthorn that Toranaga already knew what they were going to do. And then a really great ending to this episode was Toranaga finally goes to visit his son, walking on his own. He's not coughing as much, all that good stuff as well. And he goes and he gets the revelation. He says, thank you for buying him time. He will not waste it. So he gets that 49 days for his death, and also mentions Hidematsu as well, that both of them played their part. That was their duty, essentially, to die, to buy him time to win this damn war. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. As usual, thank you to everyone on Patreon who supports this channel, as well as channel members on YouTube. I really appreciate it. You guys keep this channel going. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.